All right, ready to dive deep? Today, we're heading straight into the trenches of leadership.
Ooh, trenches. Sounds intense.
You bet. We're talking Navy SEAL leadership, straight from the battlefield.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of battlefield are we talking?
Think Ramadi, during the Iraq War. High stakes, no room for error.
Now, if that's a pressure cooker, where are we getting these insights from?
Our primary source is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin.
Former SEALs, right.
Yep, and they were right in the thick of it. They don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk.
Okay, so what's the core message? What did they learn from all that chaos?
Well, imagine this. Jocko's leading a SEAL task unit in Ramadi, working with Army soldiers, Iraqi forces, the whole 9 yards.
Sounds like a complicated operation.
It was. Buildings on top of buildings, insurgents everywhere, constant threat. And in the middle of all this, they had a friendly fire incident, a tragic one.
Wow, I can only imagine the weight of that situation. So much second-guessing, blame going around.
Right. You'd think the first instinct would be to figure out who messed up on the ground. But Jocko, he does something completely different.
What do you mean?
He says, and this is a direct quote, "There was only one person to blame for everything that had gone wrong on the operation. Me."
He took full responsibility.
Full ownership. He didn't point fingers. He didn't try to shift blame. He recognized that as the leader, he owned the entire operation, the successes and the failures.
That's a powerful mindset.
Yeah.
But how does that actually play out in leading a team?
Well, the book dives deep into this concept they call extreme ownership. It's about recognizing that leaders are responsible for everything their team does or fails to do.
So it's not just about taking the blame when things go wrong. It's about taking ownership of the entire process.
Exactly. And they have this saying that really drives it home. There are no bad teams, only bad leaders.
Ooh, I like that. Makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. It challenges you to look at your own leadership style. If your team's constantly hitting roadblocks or making excuses, how much of that is a reflection of the leader?
That's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is, but it's crucial. And they give this perfect example of how powerful this can be, straight from SEAL training.
Oh, you mean Hell Week?
That's the one. They have these boat crews competing against each other, pushing themselves to the limit.
Sounds brutal.
It is. And there was this one crew, Boat Crew the Sixth. They were consistently at the bottom, exhausted, demoralized, blaming everyone but themselves.
So they were stuck in a victim mentality.
Exactly. And the instructors, they decided to shake things up. They swapped the leader of Boat Crew the Sixth with the leader of the top-performing crew.
Same guys, different leader.
Yep. Same challenges, same crazy pressure.
Yeah.
And you know what happened?
What? Did they magically turn into super SEALs overnight?
Not quite. But Boat Crew the Sixth went from last place to first.
Whoa, seriously? Just from switching leaders?
It wasn't about the individual guys suddenly getting stronger or more skilled. It was about the new leader instilling this sense of ownership, accountability, and belief in themselves.
So by embodying that extreme ownership mindset, the leader essentially unlocked the potential of the team.
It's incredible, right? And what's even more fascinating is that they take this concept beyond the battlefield. They apply it to business, to everyday life.
So it's not just a military thing. This extreme ownership idea has broader applications.
Absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting. But we'll have to save that for next time. All right, so where were we? Ah, yes, extreme ownership, but there's so much more to unpack here.
Okay, lay it on me.
So one of the most fascinating things these guys talk about is this concept of the dichotomy of leadership.
Dichotomy, huh? Sounds like a mouthful.
It does, but it's basically this idea that great leaders, they have to balance all these seemingly opposite qualities.
Okay, give me an example. What kind of qualities?
Well, think about it. You need to be confident, right? But not cocky.
Right.
You got to be decisive, but also willing to listen to your team.
So finding that sweet spot is key.
Exactly. It's like walking a tightrope. And they give this great example from the book about how the SEALs, these elite warriors, they had to earn the respect of the regular Army and Marines they were working with in Ramadi.
I can imagine those guys had some big egos to manage.
Oh, yeah. But they couldn't just waltz in with their SEAL badges and expect everyone to fall in line.
So humility was a big part of it.
Huge. They had to check their egos, build relationships, show they were there to work together.
It's like that saying, there's no I in team.
Exactly. And another example is this balance between discipline and empowering your team.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Too much control, and you stifle initiative.
Right. But too little control, and it's chaos. You need that balance.
It's like finding that sweet spot between micromanaging and giving your team the freedom to execute. knowing when to step in, when to delegate.
And that, my friend, is where the dichotomy of leadership comes in. It's not about being one or the other. It's about recognizing the situation and adjusting your approach.
So how do you know when to tighten the reins and when to loosen them up? That's the million-dollar question.
It is, and the book has some great insights on that. One of the key principles they emphasize is decentralized command.
Decentralized command, break that down for me.
Think of it like this. You got to trust your team on the ground to make decisions without having to constantly check in with headquarters.
Okay, that makes sense in a combat situation. Things are moving fast. You can't always wait for orders from the top.
Exactly. And they have this amazing story in the book that really brings it to life. Jocko's team, they're providing sniper support for an army unit clearing houses in Ramadi.
Oh man, Ramadi. Talk about a high-pressure environment.
No kidding. Constant enemy fire, IED threats, you name it. And in the middle of all this, a report comes in that there's enemy snipers on a rooftop.
Oh wow, that's a hairy situation.
Big time. And the army commander, he's ready to call in an airstrike. But Jocko, he hesitates.
He hesitates. Wow.
He wants to verify the target. He's not just going to blindly follow orders.
That's pretty bold, questioning the intel like that, especially when there's pressure to act quickly.
It is, but he trusts his SEAL sniper team leader.
Yeah.
The guy who's actually closer to the situation, who has eyes on the target.
So he's giving him the authority to make the call.
He is. That's decentralized command in action.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat here. What happens next?
Well, the SEAL team leader, he assesses the situation. He determines that they don't have a clear shot, and engaging could risk friendly casualties.
So he's thinking about the bigger picture, not just taking out the enemy, but protecting his own guys.
Exactly. He advises against the airstrike.
And Jocko, he backs him up, even with the army commander pushing for a different course of action.
He does. He trusts his team. He trusts their judgment. And it turns out it was the right call. They avoided a potentially disastrous friendly fire incident.
Wow, talk about a leadership lesson.
It really highlights the power of trusting your team, empowering them to make decisions. But it also makes you think, how do you build that level of trust? Especially in such a high-stakes environment.
Right.
It's not something that just happens overnight.
Definitely not. And it leads us to another key principle they talk about, leading up and down the chain.
Yeah, this is a big one. Early on in his deployment, Jocko, he was constantly bombarded with questions and requests from his higher-ups. He felt micromanaged.
That classic disconnect between the guys on the ground and the guys in the ivory tower.
Exactly. And he was frustrated. But then he realized he needed to shift his mindset.
How so?
Instead of complaining, he decided to take ownership of the communication flow.
So he's being proactive, bridging that gap himself.
Yep. He started sending detailed reports to his CO, invited him on missions to see firsthand what they were dealing with.
He's leading up the chain by providing context, building that trust.
And you know what? It worked. The more information he provided, the more trust he built, and the more autonomy he was given to make decisions on the ground.
It's like that saying, give trust to get trust.
Exactly. And that brings us to another crucial principle, which might sound a bit counterintuitive.
Okay, I'm all ears.
It's the idea that in the chaos of combat, or even in a fast-paced business environment, the best plans are often the simplest ones.
Simple, not easy, right?
You got it. And it might seem like a complex problem would require a complex solution.
Yeah, that's how we usually think, right? More moving parts, more sophisticated strategies.
But the problem is, those overly complex plans, they're difficult to communicate, understand, and execute under pressure.
They can actually make things more confusing, right? When you need to be clear and decisive.
Exactly. And they give this great example in the book about a company with this super convoluted bonus structure.
Oh, I've seen those. Weighted metrics, tiered ratings. It's like trying to decipher a secret code.
And the irony was, this overly complex system, it wasn't even motivating employees or improving performance.
People were too busy trying to game the system to actually focus on the work itself.
Exactly. So what do? They simplified it drastically.
They cut through all the clutter.
Yep. Instead of trying to account for every possible variable, they focused on the two most important metrics, quantity and quality.
Strip it back to the essentials. Focus on what truly matters.
And you know what? It worked. Performance improved, morale went up. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective.
Makes you think, where else could we apply this simple, not easy principle?
It's everywhere, really,
Yeah.
from our work processes to our personal lives. We often overcomplicate things unnecessarily.
I know I'm guilty of that.
Me too.
Yeah.
But that leads us to another fascinating principle from the book.
Okay, hit me with it.
It's this idea that discipline equals freedom.
Now that's a paradox if I've ever heard one.
It does sound strange, right? Discipline, we usually associate it with restrictions, with limitations.
Yeah, like following rules, sticking to a schedule.
But the book argues that actually that kind of discipline can create more freedom in the long run.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that work?
They use the example of evidence collection during raids in Ramadi.
Oh man, those raids must have been intense.
They were, and initially Jocko's team had this ransack approach.
Ransack, like just tearing through everything.
Pretty much. But then the rules of engagement changed. They needed to meet stricter standards for evidence admissibility in Iraqi courts.
So they had to up their game.
Big time. And that's where the discipline came in. Jocko's assistant platoon commander, he stepped up and created a systematic procedure for evidence collection.
So instead of chaos, they brought in order and structure.
They assigned specific tasks to individuals. One person sketches the room layout, another labels evidence bags, another handles photography.
They turned it into a well-oiled machine.
Exactly. And the results were incredible. They went from struggling to collect usable evidence to being able to hit multiple targets in a single night.
All while maintaining a much higher standard of accuracy and organization.
And that's the key. By having that disciplined structure, they actually free themselves up to be more effective, more efficient.
It's like that saying, work smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And it's not just about combat scenarios. Think about your own life. Discipline in your personal routines, working out, waking up early, managing your time, it can create more freedom in the long run.
It's about investing the effort up front to create a system that works for you so you can then operate more efficiently and effectively.
And that's the beauty of discipline equals freedom. The more disciplined you are in the small things, the more freedom you have to achieve your larger goals.
It's amazing how much we've uncovered already, and we're just scratching the surface of extreme ownership.
You're right. There's still a ton to explore, but if you're enjoying this deep dive so far, trust me, you're going to love what's coming up.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. What else is there?
Well, one thing that really resonated with me was the importance of decisiveness, especially when you're in those situations where you're facing a ton of uncertainty.
Makes sense in a combat situation, right? You don't have the luxury of sitting around and pondering your options forever.
Yeah, but think about it. We face those kinds of situations all the time, even in our everyday lives.
True, making tough calls with limited information, that's a pretty universal leadership challenge.
It is, and the SEALs, they have a whole framework for approaching those situations. They don't just rely on gut feeling, they have a process.
Okay, walk me through it.
So they have this incredible story in the book about a mission to capture a high-value target in Ramadi.
Ramadi again. Man, those guys were constantly in the hot seat.
No kidding, and this mission was no exception. Intel suggested the target was involved in a plot to kidnap an American soldier.
So the stakes were sky high.
You bet, time was of the essence. But they were also dealing with incomplete intel, a complex urban environment, the constant threat of IEDs. It was a pressure cooker.
Sounds like it. So what kind of decisions did they have to make on the fly?
Well, at one point they discovered a possible alternate route to the target building.
Okay, a shortcut.
Potentially. But it wasn't clear if it was safe. It could save them time, but it also could put them in a more vulnerable position.
That's a tough call. Risk versus reward. Got to weigh those options carefully.
Exactly. And Jocko, he describes how he laid out the facts for his team. Here's what we know. Here are the risks. Here are the potential benefits. But ultimately, he left the final decision to the SEAL leading the point element.
The guy on the ground, closest to the situation.
Right. That's that decentralized command principle we talked about earlier.
Trusting your team to make those critical decisions, I can see how that would be tough for some leaders to let go of that control.
It is, but that's where the discipline comes in. The discipline to trust your team, to empower them.
So it's not about just blindly trusting your gut. It's about having a process, a framework for making those tough calls.
Exactly. It's about gathering as much information as possible, weighing the risks and rewards, consulting with your team, and then making a decision and sticking with it.
So decisiveness isn't just about being quick on the draw. It's about having that deliberate process behind it.
And it's about being comfortable with good enough, knowing that you can't always wait for perfect information.
Oh man, that's a tough one for me. I always want to gather all the data, analyze every angle before making a move.
I get it. Analysis paralysis can be a real trap. But the SEALs, they have this saying, slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Interesting. What does that even mean?
It means taking the time to make a deliberate, well-informed decision will ultimately lead to faster and more effective action.
So it's not about rushing the decision, it's about having a clear process and being confident in your ability to make the call.
And I think that's one of the most valuable takeaways from Extreme Ownership. It's not just a book about combat, it's about leadership in all aspects of life.
Absolutely. It's about taking ownership of our actions, building strong teams, and making those tough decisions with confidence.
If there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive, it's this. Extreme ownership. It's not just a catchy phrase, it's a powerful principle that can truly transform the way we lead and the way we live.
And for those who are already familiar with these concepts, I'd ask, what's the next level for you? How can you push yourself even further? How can you take these principles and really make them your own?
Those are great questions to reflect on. And that's a wrap on our deep dive into extreme ownership. We've only just begun to scratch the surface, but I hope this has sparked some ideas, some insights that you can take with you into your own leadership journey.
Thanks for taking us on this journey. It's been an incredible exploration.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay disciplined, stay focused, and remember, extreme ownership is the key to unlocking your full potential.